Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. And Mike, it's the holiday season. You know, a lot of people doing their Christmas shopping right now. I know you and I have been doing that. You know what would be the best Christmas present ever from the viewers of Ask Mike?
What would that be?
To like and subscribe. That is what we need. Please like this video. Please subscribe to our account if you haven't already been subscribed to Pig Trail Nation. It helps us out. We keep getting to do this for you because you guys keep supporting us like that. So please do that.
And a lot of NIL agents are shopping for Christmas for their clients who happen to be college football players.
And we're going to talk about that. I love that you brought that up because that is a huge topic of discussion on this week's Ask Mike. So the first question is from Tusk Varna, who says, I'm disabled, so going to the games is difficult. I have to save money to go. I feel the players have no loyalty to the fans. I left pro football because of free agency, and now the college players have left me. It feels very personal.
Yeah, now, there aren't going to be a lot of fans who identify with what he said about leaving pro football because of free agency because they don't remember when there wasn't free agency. I do. And I had the same reaction. There were a lot of things that caused me to stop being a fan of pro sports, and this was before I got into this business, but that was one of them. And let me try to explain this because I freely admit now, free agency should be allowed. Throughout most of the 20th century, pro athletes were just the property of the team that owned them, and they didn't have very many rights. They drafted you, and you stayed there unless they decided to trade you. Couldn't just go out on your own. And you made whatever they allowed you to make. If you didn't like what they gave you, what were you going to do?
Yeah, or even if you didn't like the coaches, you had to be unhappy.
They were going over the top, and it had to change. But still, if you look at it from the standpoint that I had growing up as a kid, I always wanted to be a pro athlete. I wish that I could have been. And when I would look at pro athletes, baseball players, basketball, football, I would think, what a life. Because you get to get paid to do what you want to do, and it's fun. It's not a job. You're not out there, climbing up a telephone pole and dealing with electrical wires or anything. This is an actual game you like to play, and so you're having fun, but you're getting paid a pretty good amount of money. It's not anything like what they get now, but you get paid pretty good money, and all these fans love you. Everywhere you go, they're just, wow, look, and they want their autograph. And I thought, man, what a great thing. But I understood the relationship that had to exist between those athletes and the fans. And that's the part that gets left behind now. When these kids bug out of the portal, you're not just turning your back on your teammates. And these days, most teammates just don't seem to care. They just put out stuff on the internet. Good luck, bro, and all this stuff. And fans get mad at that. Yeah. Because you may think it's good luck, bro, but I cheered for that person. I bought tickets. I thought they were Razorbacks, and now they're just turning their back on me. And this is what he's basically saying, and that's the part that doesn't get talked about is, are you dumping on the coaches? Are you doing the right thing for yourself? And we get into these arguments about what you're doing as a player, and you have a right to do this. No, you shouldn't. And but they leave the fans out of it, and they're the most important part because, yeah, you may need to go wherever it is that's going to pay you more money, and you may have to do what's best for you, but you wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for the fans. Absolutely. You wouldn't have a stadium to play in. You wouldn't have any uniform. You would have nothing. You'd be out there like a bunch of guys playing pickup football. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is one of those people. He's saying, you left me behind.
But I totally get what he's saying here because it's just hard because college athletics has changed. And it's hard for me even understanding why NIL has to be a thing, but I do miss the old ways. I do miss, I grew up around college athletics, watching my dad coach and all of those things. And I loved when you talk to his players, they would tell you why they're doing it because they love the sport. They were just grateful to be able to play the sport they love at the collegiate level and get an education as well. They said, it's great. I'm so happy with what I'm able to do here because I'm able to do what I love and have my education paid for. I miss those days a little bit because it does take it takes something away from it. I miss that passion, that drive that that college athletics had and pro sports didn't because of the money, right?
I had a conversation several years ago with Dan Hampton, NFL Hall of Famer, Pro Football Hall of Fame, whatever, College Football Hall of Fame, Razorback Hall of Fame, played on the 77 team that went to the Orange Bowl and beat Oklahoma, one of the great Razorback teams of all time. And he said, you know what? You understand what our scholarship was in those days? We got room and board, but we stayed in an athletic dorm. There was no apartment, no living off. We stayed in an athletic dorm, and they fed us, and we ate what they put in front of us. And he said, Sunday, that cafeteria was closed. We had to go, where were we going to go eat? He said they gave us $100 a month laundry money or some crazy amount. That's what they had for the whole month. And he said what we learned was there were fans that always liked us. They'd come up to us after games, and we got to know certain families. And he said, we just called them up and said, can we come over and eat at your house? And they loved it. And so we'd go over and eat dinner with them, lunch and dinner with them. And he said there was a bond there with the fans. And he said, we never thought we were being abused or taken advantage of because we were getting to play football, which is what we wanted. Yeah. And here's a guy that went on and played pro football, made a lot of money doing it, but he doesn't relate to a lot of this stuff anymore. Yeah. And a lot of these former players don't.
Yeah, they've been very vocal about that on social media. We'll get into that a little bit here. Sherlock Hogg says, it's clear that most players don't share the same pride in the helmet. As long as the money is so large, I doubt that'll ever change. It's no wonder some coaches are getting out. I'm concerned that college football fandom might start to fade. However, I heard on the radio last week that college football is more popular now than ever.
Well, it is because fans still love the sport, and I think the playoffs has kind of generated some interest. If this continued the way it is right now, it wouldn't. It would eventually start to affect them, but it's not. We've talked about revenue sharing on the way. Now, you and I both agree on one thing. We don't really know what this is going to look like till it happens. We've been told certain things. So I don't know that revenue sharing will be the great answer or will not be the great answer. I'm not sure yet, but I do think it's an effort to eliminate what's happening right now. And we'll see if it works, because if you don't do something, I do think they'll damage the sport, because I think eventually they're going to drive a bunch of schools out, most of the schools, and they're going to have a split, and there'll be just these big fancy schools that have all the money, and then everybody else.
And we talked about the Super League.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans will get turned off by that. Maybe the fans of those schools will still like it, but that's not a lot of people if you're talking about 30 schools compared to 200 or 300 and all their fans spread over throughout the country. So we'll see how it works out.
We will, but I see what Sherlock Hogg is saying, though, that he is concerned the college football fandom might start to fade, because there are a lot of people, even young people, right, who are like, yeah, this is getting a bit out of hand.
Yeah.
This is getting a bit out
going
of hand.
Going into the portal, coming out of the portal, going into the portal, where am I going to go? And the other issue is it's not just going to the portal, it's where you go.
Right.
Josh Braun, he ended up going to Kentucky.
All
okay,
right.
No big deal.
Hang out at Kentucky, that's funny.
3 guys going to Ole Miss. What did Carmona say?
Yeah, he said, we'll see you then. We'll see you.
Takutis, right?
Yeah, we'll see you
we'll
week 3. We'll see you
week
3. And somebody responded to him like, I hope you take him down. I hope you show him what he missed. He goes, I got you.
They won't go head to head, but.
Right, but there is some, and I think this, Mike, and I don't know if you agree with me. I get they have to be nice, it's Taylor Green, see you, bro, good luck. They're their teammates. But I like the Fernando Carmona, like, nah, we're not being nice on that field. Like, I might be nice to you in our group text, but I'm not being nice to you on that field come week 3. So That'll Do Pig says, there seems to be a habit of players leaving the football team for the past few years now. The evidence points to coaches the coaches are giving brutal assessments of their performances for the year. What do you think?
Okay, that question comes out of a story we both have heard, and it may or may not be true. The degree to which it happened may or may not be that bad, which was when the coaches started negotiating with these players about the demands that they had. You got to give me a lot more, I'm leaving. That it didn't go real well. that coaches were like saying some rather brutal things to these
That
guys.
some coaches said, "You're not worth that amount of money. I'll
Yeah.
tell you why."
But that's not why they were leaving, and that's what he confuses. They're not leaving because of that.
Yeah.
Because they're leaving because they did go in there and say, I want more money, and the coaches had they know what their NIL budget is, and they know what they can give their current players and still have left over to bring in other players that they need. And when you start, as Sam Pittman said, if we gave every one of these guys what they were asking, we wouldn't have enough money left over to bring in the players we need.
Correct.
So we had to make decisions. So again, yes, I think in some cases they got told some things they didn't want to hear. Too bad. If that's what you want to do, if you want to go in and negotiate with coaches about money, don't get offended when they say some things you may not like.
Well, and also you have to think about this too. There might be some players that we know the obvious reasons for leaving, right? Playing time, more money. But there are some players and something to be said, and we don't know if every case is like this.
Every case is different.
Every case is different, but I wouldn't be shocked if some of those players opened up, behind closed doors and said, actually, I didn't really like the coaching staff. And actually, I had a problem with this coach or Sam Pittman or whoever it was. That happens. That does. And we can't ignore that could be a case for some of these players. But the bottom line is, I think they have to be brutal in those negotiations. Those NIL agents are going in there. They're trying to get the best deal. And so the coaching staff has to stand firm. No, we don't think your client is worth that. We don't think you're worth that. That's tough to hear, right? When you're told that you're not
Especially,
worth that
and I
amount
don't
of
know
money.
the process. I don't know if they're talking directly to the player or the agent, but it's probably the player.
It's probably well, if they're on that team right now, I mean, if you listen to Sam, right, their agent is going out and shopping, right, for them. The player goes in and says, Sam, it's actually this number, right? And then he might have to have a brutal conversation with them about, we're not going to pay you that. Well, why? Because you're not worth that. And I understand. It's hard to hear you're not worth the amount of money you think you are. But guess what? It's a fact of life.
Well, it was couched not directly like that. It was couched in terms of, if we won 10 games last year, we'll give you that, but we didn't.
No.
We got to get better. So why are you worth that when we're all trying to get better and bring in other players that will make us better?
Exactly. It's a tough thing to hear, but guess what? It's a fact of life. You want to be treated like adults? Guess what?
You got to put up with it.
You got to put those big boy pants on, is what my mom would say. Big girl pants on, Hot Dogger asks, what would be the value of having a general manager? And is this the trend for schools going forward with NIL being the focus in college athletics? Pittman mentioned the possibility of hiring a general manager, which I think is so needed.
Yeah.
So needed.
I try to make this analogy.
Okay.
You got a car dealership. Nobody knows the value of those cars and what they're worth better than the mechanic, because they know those cars inside and out.
Sure.
But you don't want a mechanic up on the showroom floor negotiating with a customer that comes in and wants to buy that car.
No.
You want somebody that knows how to negotiate, because you're trying to get as much money as possible for that car. They're trying to get it for as little as possible. The opposite is true sort of with what's going on now. The players are trying to get more. You're trying to get them to take less. But the point is, you need a negotiator.
Yeah.
You don't need a guy that's out there that's teaching them how to catch passes or block or whatever.
Yeah.
You need somebody that, and Sam Pittman defended them, he and his coaching staff, a little bit. He said, look, Hunter Yurachek knows that. He knows we know how the value of these players. So it wasn't like we were just inept in these evaluations. And I understood what he was saying from that standpoint. We can be negotiators from that standpoint of how valuable they are. But the difference is they are not negotiators. They're not used to going in there and so maybe they did get a little too brutal in some of their assessments. That's the whole point. If you've got a professional negotiator in there talking to these players, then the coaches don't even have to be involved in it.
And using your analogy of the car lot, car salesman, and using that analogy, it gives the mechanics an opportunity to spend more time on those cars, which is what they're good at, right?
Yes.
More time and more effort on fixing up those cars, on developing those cars, right? And making sure that they come out of that lot looking beautiful and great.
If I'm hiring a GM, if I'm a athletic director and I'm going to have hire a guy to come in and be the GM of my football team, you know what I want? I want somebody that knows how to negotiate.
Right, not a coach, someone that's worked in like a front office, kind of like what Bill Belichick has with Lombardi, who's worked in the front office with him at teams and at NFL teams, and so that is someone that you kind of want doing that. I mean,
it looks like Arkansas is going to do that, but Sam Pittman said if we do it, we're not even going to talk about it till next spring.
I think they need a GM. I truly think that's where we're heading, and most teams are going to have one, and so I really think it would benefit Sam Pittman, this coaching staff, or even if he's gone after next year, it's going to benefit the next coaching staff to have somebody like that. Marty Bird's Proxy wants to know, did Kudus and Braxton play the system, keeping their red shirt to save for the next team? I hate to even think that could be the case, but this is all uncharted waters.
Well, the question relates to the fact that both of them were hurt at various times. Both of them missed most of the season. Now, did they know that they were going to transfer, and therefore they didn't even they kind of wanted to sit out so they wouldn't get hurt, so that if they transferred, they'd be in great shape? I mean, you'd have to be them to know that. I find it hard to believe that you've got trainers and doctors that see these people that are hurt. I can't believe they would be able to fool them. Like Braxton was hurt all year, basically. They kept talking about how he's just not better, he's not better. Well, what, is he faking that and they don't know that? I don't buy that far into it. That's all I'm saying. Now, the way they left, still doesn't keep fans from thinking that. And so you can think whatever you want as a fan. To me, when you're doing this, when you're transferring, your life is out there in front of full view of everybody, and they're going to talk about, yeah, he wasn't hurt, he just faked it. Now, he probably didn't, but if fans think it, they think it.
I would also be very surprised if Kudus knew he was going to transfer and then said to Sam Pittman, that just seems to me like a bad thing brewing to say that, because the story comes out and then you look awful.
Well, he looks awful, and he's never disputed that when people have said it.
He hasn't, which makes me think, because listen, if I'm these kids' NIL agents or whatever, or their family members, I'm advising them not to do that. Do not go to Sam Pittman and say, yeah, coach, I'm a hog for life, I'm not going to do that. Or don't go on a podcast and say, I hate Ole Miss, I would never go there. We're looking at you, man. We're looking at you.
Absolutely.
Kevin says, this mess of the football program is not the fans' fault. Like usual, the administration was not prepared for NIL. The last few years, they've been scrambling to catch up. Now they want fans to pony up for a bad program.
I mean, there couldn't be, I give my opinion.
Oh,
it's not the only
Ask
opinion.
Mike, it is.
There couldn't be a more idiotic assessment of what's going on right now than that. Because what he's basically saying is, they just sat around over there twiddling their thumbs and screwed our program up, and now they want us to give them money. That's not what happened.
Yeah.
Let's go back to when NIL first came out, because people forget this stuff if they ever knew it. When the NIL ruling started, because of the Supreme Court ruling that you're going to have to start paying players if you use their name, image, and likeness, they thought, all these schools thought, and there was an NCAA rule that basically specified that. And what the rule was is, you can't offer somebody an NIL deal while you're recruiting them. They have to come to your school first,
Correct.
get enrolled, and then the school will give you a list of names for agents if you don't have one, or you can have your own agent. But that agent will negotiate true NIL deals for you.
Yeah, and you can go out in the community and get your NIL deals. Yeah.
So that would be a true NIL deal. And that's the way Arkansas tried to do it.
Correct.
Well, almost immediately what happened was Tennessee, for one, got their state legislature to say, well, this NCAA rule is not legal. Well, of course it wasn't legal. The NCAA rules aren't the law. They're rules that you have if you want to be a part of an organization. But they got the state legislature of Tennessee to say, it is legal to offer an NIL in this state to a high school kid. And then they just went, well, we'll do it. And then when the NCAA stepped in and said they were going to investigate, they got some lawyers, they went to the court, and they got a stay or whatever a hold on enforcing this rule. And that hold, I think, is still in place while this whole thing is being decided in court. So that caused the whole thing to change and turn into something that it was never supposed to be. You're going to blame Arkansas for following the rule and say Tennessee was cooler because they cheated. Well, if you want to say that, that's true.
And collectives, when they started happening, oh, we'll pull all of our money from our different donors and everything and use them to give NIL deals to players. And people were like, whoa, wait a second, whoa.
And, well, then the second thing that happened is when Arkansas started trying to collect NIL money and get help, boosters stepped in, yes. But then other schools like Ole Miss were doing these collectives, and I would call them grassroots collectives because they're going to average everyday fans. People don't have season tickets.
Correct.
So they can't spend all this money, but they can give $50 a month or $30 or whatever, and they amassed a huge war chest being able to do that. Razorback fans totally rejected that. Arkansas's Edge program, which was an NIL, was a fraction of what Ole Miss's was. And reading on the internet some of the reaction to that, most Razorback fans had the attitude, why should I pay money to these players to come in here and play? They're not even showing any loyalty. They're just leaving it. Yeah. And so I understood what they were saying.
Yeah.
But here's what I would say to the question.
Okay.
Guy that asked the question. So you're saying they created this mess and now they want you to pay up. No, they wanted you to pay up before if you want a better program. That's why they wanted your NIL.
Correct.
All right. If you have a bad program, this is the way I look at this. If your program is struggling the way Arkansas's is right now, they had 4 wins, now they've got 6, they're trying to go to 8 next year. What is the best way to do that? Do you fire a coach, spend a bunch of money, start all over, and then have no NIL money because you spent all this money on coaches? Or do you keep your coaches and try to spend as much NIL money as you can to bring in better players? Okay, that's the approach. But what if you've got people like him that don't want to give them money? So how are they going to get better? You're part of the problem if you're talking about this. The program's not going to get better if you have the attitude, I'm not going to give money because it's a bad program. It can't turn around if you don't.
And there's a lot of people that are saying, well, I'm not going to give money to the program if it's led by Sam Pittman or whatever, right? There's a lot of people that are saying, I'm not giving money unless he was fired, right? And I do understand that kind of mentality because you see Coach Cal comes in here and that's when Edge got a big boost, right? There's no denying it that getting a new coach in that gets the fan base excited would be helpful to NIL. The question is that I go back to, that I tell these fans that ask me that same question, I go, but you want someone big, right? You would need a name that gets you excited. What if Arkansas wasn't able to do that?
Well,
and then they've put themselves in an even worse situation because they may not have been able to bring in, let's say, Rhett Lashley or somebody that the fan base really wants. Or gosh, I mean, I heard Nick Saban. You know, if they're not able to bring in someone that moves the needle for you, then they have to pay all of that money for the buyouts and the buyouts of the coaching staff. And they still don't have people giving Edge.
Cal got this, put this team together with 9 players. That's 9 NIL deals, and they were big deals, but it's 9. With football, you're talking about a total of 85, and they may not all get big deals, but you're talking probably 30 or 40 guys getting pretty good money.
Deals, yeah.
It's a totally different thing trying to turn football around. It's not as easy, and it's harder. And here's the other thing that I just wish fans understood this. I'm not saying a coach wouldn't come in here and take this job who is really, really good, but he'd have to really stop and think. Because, again, I go back to Rhett Lashley and all these people that thought he would come here.
Yeah.
Why would he come here? He's in a job where he might have to beat one good team every year, Clemson.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you're probably in the – and he didn't even do that, and he's in the playoffs. But that's who you're – it's a league in which you don't have to play this brutal schedule. Who wants to come into the SEC, try to rebuild Arkansas in a league where probably 12 at least of the 16 teams could kick your butt? They're all trying to fight for the same stuff.
And also SMU, you guys know this, everybody knows this.
They got the money.
They have money. I've talked to some of their boosters. They have money. So he might be leaving a better NIL situation for an NIL situation where some fans say they don't want to give, they don't want to be a part of this. I mean, to me,
Now, look, I like Sam Pittman. I think he's a good guy, but that's got nothing to do with my position on this that I've had for about a year now, which is all of you people that think this problem is going to be solved because you just fire him and you're going to get somebody really good that's going to turn it around. Who do you think you're going to get? Who's going to do that? You're going to find that I don't even know a guy that's come in really and made a huge difference over the years. Lou Holtz came in and had 2 or 3 good years, but he ended up getting fired eventually. Hatfield came in and started slow and got better, but Frank, he got problems and he left. You know, Danny Ford came in and he was only mildly successful. Houston Nutt, honestly, since Arkansas joined the SEC, has the best run. And he had some 10-win seasons, some 9-win seasons, and he had some bad years too. And he left on his own, but he left with a lot of the fans mad at him. Then you talk about Bielema. Bielema came in here with a big, strong pedigree, but he didn't live up to it. He didn't do here what he'd done at Wisconsin, okay? And then what do you end up with when you get rid of him? Everybody thinks they're going to get Gus in here, and Gus plays them, and they spend all this money or get all these people together ready to throw a big contract at him, and Gus just uses that contract that you were offering to get a better deal at Auburn, and you're stuck, and you have no answer other than that, and you end up with Chad Morris. And by the time Sam Pittman took this job, people need to understand, 2 people wanted it. 2, Sam Pittman or Barry Lunny Jr. Neither one of them had ever been a head coach, and neither one of them were coordinators. That's who wanted the job. Now, what has happened in the last 5 seasons now that changes that? You suddenly think now when you go out and try to get another coach, you're going to get some genius, some great guy. It could happen.
It could.
Sometimes a guy just wants the job. I mean, I'm looking at Joey McGuire. This guy grew up in Texarkana, and he said, I was a Razorback fan. I love the Hogs.
Now I'm like, wait a second, we need to be looking at this guy.
They might at some point offer him if he continues to do well at Texas Tech, and maybe he would be a guy that would come in here because he's got the connection. But it's just getting harder and harder. There aren't a bunch of guys out there with connections to this Razorback program that are tearing it up in football. And so you would have to get a guy that would be willing to go into this meat grinder that the SEC is and say to himself, if I don't win in 2 or 3 years, they'll run me off.
Yeah, and depending on what the NIL situation looks like as well, that's another factor of this, because I'm telling you, the head coaches now know that is a way to win, right? You have to have the money has to be there too. Coach Cal's a guy that knows that if the money wasn't there at Arkansas, if he didn't have the backing financially, he probably wouldn't have taken this job either. It's silly to think that, I'll come here. I don't care what the NIL situation is like. I don't care that fans don't want to give or whatever. I'm gonna walk in and I'm gonna try and do my best. Mm-hmm. No, you're trying to win. You're competitive. So that has been my question this entire time: is who would they have gotten? And that would change my answer based on if it was someone like Rhett Lashley. If they could get someone like Rhett Lashley, okay, that changes my answer. But I don't see that happening. I'm sorry. I don't see it happening. Anyways, moving forward, 20 Gauge says, I don't think revenue sharing is the saving grace that everybody thinks it is. There's a $20.5 million cap from what I've read. Arkansas is probably going to share this across all sports/athletes for the most part. This will still leave us woefully behind on actual NIL unless there are rules connected with this revenue sharing. What is Arkansas's plan for sharing the revenue with athletes?
He's misunderstanding what we've been talking about because, again, the 2 things are not related. NIL is different from revenue sharing.
And NIL is not going away because of revenue sharing.
What he's asking is, what is Arkansas going to do with the 20-something million dollars? And he's suggesting that they're going to spend it on all sports. That's not what I've been told. I've been told that most of that money is going to go to football.
Yep.
And basketball will get some, but basketball has their own kind of deals going on, so they don't really need a lot of that. And baseball may get some of it, and the other sports, 2 or 3 of them may get others than that, but they're going to be there. And people have said, well, then Title IX, they're going to sue. Well, let me talk to you about Title IX. Because Title IX was all about the opportunity to play sports by getting a college scholarship. And what the Supreme Court determined was you have to provide an equal, a representative number of women's scholarships for women's sports that you do with men's sports. So that's why when that came out, a lot of men's sports started going away. Arkansas eliminated men's swimming, for instance, to make that balance better. The courts had ended up acknowledging that there is no women's sport, the equivalent of football, where you have to have 80 scholarships. So they didn't make you balance it with that, but they sort of balanced all of the others together. Okay, that will remain, but there's no indication that the courts are going to come in and say, oh, wait a minute, you've got to take all of this revenue, this $20 million, and spread it equally, because I'm told they're not.
Yeah.
It's the athletic director's decision as to how much money he sends to each sport, and then once it gets given to a sport like football, then the coaches decide who gets what, and it's not equal. Quarterback's going to get more money than an offensive lineman. You know, a stud wide receiver is probably going to get more money than a cornerback. They will do this, but some of it is also the value to the team, what you did the year before or whatever. So that brings in a new part of this in which the coaches evaluate players, and you now are actually getting paid for playing football and how well you pay it. That's not NIL. NIL still will be pushed back to what it was originally intended, which is you have the ability to use your name, image, or likeness to sell a product. Correct. And if you can get an agent that gets you a deal, they will look at that deal and see if it's really worth that. And if it is, you can get it. But if they think it's inflated because the person offering the NIL is a booster, it's going to go down. So that's how this is all going to change, supposedly.
Supposedly, yes.
We're still not there yet. We don't know all the Congress is supposed to get involved. They've got to do some things. We think there may be some sort of a Congress waiving the collective bargaining agreement that you would have to eliminate, you know, the antitrust. If you basically tell people they can't make more than a certain amount of money, that's an antitrust violation.
Right.
If KNWA said, I'm sorry, Courtney, but you're a woman and you can only make this amount of money, well, you could sue them.
Yes, I can, yeah.
But
they don't do that. They don't do that.
But again, when you get into athletics, I try to explain this, it's a lot like joining a country club.
Sure, yes.
You join a country club and walk out there wearing a wife-beater T-shirt and cut off jeans and see how long you're going to play golf out there.
Yeah.
Now, is it against the law to wear a wife-beater T-shirt and cut off jeans? No, it's not. And wife-beater is just a term they call that.
Yeah, they have
I'm
like
not
the tank
suggesting
tops.
they're beating their wives.
It's the white tank top.
It's just a crazy term. I don't even know where they came up with it. But you can't go out there and just wear some T-shirt and wear cut
jorts.
Because they will, jorts. Because they'll tell you get out of here. And it's not because you've broken the law. It's because in order to be a part of that club, you have to agree to those rules.
Correct.
And I still think that's where all this is going to come in.
And we hope so. There's a couple of things, like you said, that have to be in place, and we still don't really know. And I was talking to some people about this the other day. What is going to happen with these collectives? Are they going to have stricter rules on them? Are they going to be assumed by the university now because they can, the university can pay their athletes, and that was why collectives were formed, was, so they could pay their athletes, which with an outside source. What is going to happen with those? Because that's my question too. Yeah. If they can put some rules and regulations on collectives as well,
and then maybe some rules on the portal.
Yeah,
we may end up with something like where you have to, in order to get this money from the school, you have to sign a 2-year contract. You can't leave after 1 year.
Well, again, that would bring up the whole thing about, I've talked to lawyers about this, where it's like they want these athletes to be, like you've mentioned on this show before, employees of the university. So that way they can form a players union, that way they can decide on a CBA. But the courts maybe don't want that because they have been putting the power in the athletes' hands. This is where I've said before, and people got mad at me over this, Congress needs to step in. And people are going, Courtney, no, we don't want Congress to step in with anything. Congress never does anything right. I get what you're saying.
In this case, they would.
In this case, they could, and they need to. I'm still asking, please, 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 step in and help with this crazy situation. Okay, we're going to talk about basketball now. Penn Hog says, Hog fans showed up at Madison Square Garden last Tuesday. I was blown away, and so were the Michigan fans. They had no idea Arkansas fans would outnumber the Michigan fans. I was so proud to be a fan.
Okay, what was going on there? Well, first of all, part of it was Boogie Flant from the Bronx. I mean, there was another Razorback point guard years ago, Kareem Reed. He was also from the Bronx. But he's there. He's local. He's got 100 fans that showed up there.
100 friends and family.
100 fans that are committed can make a lot of noise, so they showed up. Then I think you had a lot of people. I'm thinking, okay, Penn Hog. He's probably from somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, yeah.
So that's not far away from New York City. And I'm sure he was sitting there thinking, he, she, whoever it is, wow, we could go up there and watch a game at Madison Square Garden and watch the Razorbacks in person. That'd be cool. And then we could hang around New York City for that weekend at Christmas time. It would be wonderful. So I think they probably combined it.
Yeah, a nice trip.
And I also think there are some Razorback fans here in Arkansas that did the same thing. I think they went, wow, go up there, watch a game, hang around New York, maybe buy some Christmas presents up there. Hey, I bought this for you in New York City.
Yeah.
And you're combining things on a trip. And apparently Cal tapped into this, but he said, I don't think this is the last time we're going to do this.
Yeah, they're apparently going to play in 2025, right?
Yeah, so this could become like an annual thing. It could become, and if you move it a little closer to Christmas, it'd be even better.
Yeah, sorry, I should say he wants to play at Madison Square Garden in 2025. I think it was they're playing in Chicago on Thanksgiving Day.
Right.
Right, that's the one that was that he teased towards.
They might do another one in December.
I would love that.
New York
Another
City.
little Jimmy V. They could be in the Jimmy V Classic again. I think that'd be huge.
It'd be good.
I think that'd be huge. Okay, Eddie Lynn says the Razorbacks finally got to play in front of a full house in Arkansas, although it took playing in Central Arkansas to do that. Should Bud Walton Arena ticket holders be embarrassed? I was shocked at how many showed up. That was
I'm going to let them off the hook a little bit here because I'm going to say the following.
What?
If Arkansas played one game a year up here, they wouldn't be an arena probably, but if there were, and they played one game a year up here, I promise you it would be full. And if they played a bunch of games down in Central Arkansas, they probably wouldn't have the attendance that they had. They wouldn't fill it up if there were 10 games down there, not one. So there's some reasons for that.
Okay.
But all I will say is it's really good to have that kind of support. When you go off campus and go to Little Rock, it's nice to have those people show up and do that. But let me explain something to you. You don't fill up War Memorial Stadium, and I'm going to tell you why I think that happens. Because this is a basketball state more than it's a football state. The high school basketball in this state is way above the size of the population. Some of the best players, AAU players in the country, year in and year out, come from here. Yeah. So that's good for the basketball program.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because there's tremendous, especially in Central Arkansas, there's tremendous support for basketball. And that's one of the reasons they fill that up.
Makes sense.
But don't compare that to football because Arkansas high school football is not very good when you start comparing it to football in other states. It's just not. And I think it's because you just don't have that overall fan support. I don't think you would see, I know you don't see, if you play a team, if they played Central Arkansas in War Memorial Stadium, what would the crowd be like?
I don't think it'd be, based on what I've seen the past few years, I don't think it would be very good.
It might be 45,000, something like that, which
that
would be
more
okay,
than I
but it wouldn't be
right?
55, I don't think.
Yeah.
If they played Arkansas State, we'll find out because they play them next year.
I actually think that one maybe will do okay. I think people are excited to see that game.
But I
Weirdly
know an
enough.
Arkansas State fan. In fact, I visited with him the other day.
Okay.
And he even has a son that played there. And here's what he told me. He said, if Arkansas and Arkansas State start playing every year, they should play that game in Fayetteville. He said Arkansas State fans would rather do that because it's a bigger atmosphere. It's a big time.
I get that.
They, going to old busted up War Memorial, old thing, and I love that place, believe me. My memories go back to when that was the best stadium.
Yeah.
But the way it is now and just the way things are, he said, I'd rather go and play them at their place because our players would love to play up there in front of all those people.
Well, I get that. I feel like if I was a player too and I went to Arkansas State, I'd be like, I'm used to playing here. I want to go play in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
I want to go see that. I get that. I understand that. Speaking of that game, Hog Redneck says, kudos to Yurchek for his decision to play other in-state teams. Saturday, UCA got to play on a big stage. They played their tails off. Cal complimented them. Coach Schulman said good things about the Hogs. I thought it was a win-win. And Coach Schulman is a great guy. He's actually the neighbor of my future in-laws.
Okay.
So he's a good guy. Just want to shout him out on the show.
Well, and that's a perfect assessment of that situation. Let me tell you why Frank didn't want to do that. He didn't think it was a good idea to play in-state schools. He felt like it would start causing divided loyalties. If you start playing, then your rival with there, and then some of their fans won't like you, and then your fans, that you might lose some of your fans to them. You know, he just felt like he was a little bit idealistic. He told me one time, he said, I like to believe that when we don't play Arkansas State, their fans would root for us as long as we weren't playing them. Now, that's not true.
Yeah.
He was wrong about that. They just got mad because they wouldn't play him. But that was his whole point. And then the other thing is, you're always going to be ripe for an upset, and how embarrassing is it going to be? Because Arkansas State, if they play Arkansas, has got nothing to lose. If they lose the game, so what? You're supposed to lose. But if Arkansas loses, it's like, aha, look at you, you're a disaster, and then maybe it hurts recruiting and all that. So those were his reasons. But Yurchek came in and said, come on, people have said we need to share this revenue. And when right now we're paying, even with baseball, you're giving a guarantee to teams to come in and play at your place. And they're out-of-state teams. Why are we sending that money out of state? Let's keep it in-state whenever we can. And that was part of his reasoning, to help these schools out financially. And he said, I don't think losing a few times is going to ruin us. And so far, I think it's only happened once, maybe in baseball. They're winning the games they're supposed to win. They haven't gotten any embarrassments. They may lose to Arkansas State next year, I don't know. But it hasn't happened yet.
I think it'd be crazy if it did happen in football. I think that'll be the moment when it's like, if it does happen.
And then they might want to go get rid of you.
That's when I think people will change their minds when it happens.
I'm kidding about that. But it has worked out. He did the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's been good PR. And this game was a perfect example of that.
Great example of
both
that.
coaches were complimentary of each other. There wasn't any enmity. The players didn't get mad at each other or anything like that. It was a good deal.
It was a good opportunity for the UCA players as well, and that team and Coach Schulman as well. So I totally love when they play in-state schools. I think it's kind of fun, especially in all sports. But if they do lose, especially in football, if it ever happens,
it's not going to be good.
It's not going to be good. Anyways, Big Speed wants to know, this is our final question of the show, how is the new roster number limit in college baseball going to help/hurt? Coach Van Horn didn't seem to like it. This is a great question,
It's a
Mike.
very complicated issue. When this story first came out, that the NCAA was going to allow college baseball teams to have a maximum of 34 scholarships, I thought, wow. Arkansas has been operating on 11-7 all these years. Man, they're going to get 34. That's great. The problem is that's the limit. That doesn't mean a school has to give you that many scholarships. So what is Arkansas going to do, for instance? Because that starts in the spring of 2026. Not this spring.
This spring, the next spring.
Next year is when it starts.
Okay.
Well, guess what? That's the first year of revenue sharing. So the athletic department, we talked about it before, they've got to take this $20 million and they got to figure out where it goes. Well, part of that is the scholarships that are spent on these various sports. If you add just 10 scholarships to baseball, if you went from 11, 12 to 22, that's about $500,000. And if you did 10 more, that would be $1 million. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but if you're trying to figure out who gets what, when, where, and how, and balance this budget, Van Horn has said, when this was discussed, we're not sure how many we're going to get.
And that was something I said to people who said, this is great. I said, this is great if they can give the full 34.
Yes, if somebody were to walk, if Hunter Yurchek were to call him up and say, hey, bub, don't worry, you're going to get 34 scholarships next year, he'd be happy.
Yeah.
But I don't think he knows that yet.
I don't think he does either.
I don't think he knows how many he's going to get. Now, the other part of that is, with giving 34 scholarships, that's the roster limit. And for baseball right now, the roster limit is 40. And in the fall, there is no roster limit. So here's the way this works. Van Horn can bring in as many guys that want to come in here as their parents will pay for them to go to the University of Arkansas for the fall semester. They're paying for it, but they're coming in here to be a part of the baseball program because they might have a good fall and make the roster, and then everything changes for them.
Great.
So he's got all these extra guys out there. I don't over 50, I think, most time. Then he and his coaches can look out there, and when it's all over, when December comes around, they can go, okay, man, this guy looks good. We'll keep this guy, this guy, this guy. And they have to pare that down to 40, but they may have picked up some guys in doing that, some guys that they want to be part of the 40. Now when it drops to 34, I read this today, it's estimated that instead of dropping to 40, when you go back to 34, they estimate 1,800 college baseball players will suddenly be without a place to go in Division I. They'll be out there cut loose December 1st, and they're trying to figure out where they're going next, and probably going to end up at a lower level.
Yeah.
So that's not good, and he knows that. Now, there's also this, injuries.
Oh, gosh, don't.
Most injuries, honestly, in college baseball happen to pitchers. That's why he has an inordinate number of pitchers on his roster. Okay, when you've got a limit to 34 as opposed to 40, maybe that's 6 less pitchers. I don't know.
It's definitely going to be less pitchers.
And you start having arm problems, and next thing you know, you may get halfway through your conference race, and you may be pitching a guy out of the bullpen on weekends that was supposed to be maybe a midweek guy bullpen. And all of a sudden, your team ERA is going up. So this is why he's not exactly thrilled with all this stuff. If it was as advertised, it may be good, but you may not get all of those scholarships, and you also may be looking at, with the reduced roster, a situation where you're not as able to deal with injuries as you were before.
Ooh, I don't like either of those.
Yeah. So that's why he doesn't seem to like it.
Yeah, and that's always why he's up there on the Swatters Club, right? And he goes, "We need your money." He's like Hunter Yurchak. He's like, "We need your money. We need it. Please help us."
They need NIL money for baseball for sure.
They need NIL money. They'd like to have more money now to make
get
sure
the
scholarships. I mean, gosh, you got to feel for DVH, man. I feel like
it may be that you can use NIL money for scholarships. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. But if somebody, I got to believe somebody could. I think what they could do is somebody could just give it through the foundation. The foundation money goes into the athletic department's budget. So I believe if you had $1 million and you said, I like baseball, that's my sport to watch, I want to give $1 million to the foundation. I want it to go for extra scholarships for baseball. Then maybe it solves that problem. But that's what they're dealing with.
If somebody has $1 million. So if you're out there and you're listening and you have $1 million that you want to give to the foundation to help with the scholarship limit for Dave Van Horn.
Or 50,000 or 10,000 or whatever.
Sure, whatever you feel. I feel for Dave Van Horn every time he gets up at the Swatters Club and goes, "Please give us your money." He's great. He's wonderful. Anyways, that's going to do it for Ask Mike for this week. If we don't see you before the holidays, I won't. You'll have Alyssa next Monday because I will be home for the holidays. But have a lovely holiday season and a very Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next week. All right, short version.
Yep.